In this video, we're going to be taking a Kato HM-5 can motor and putting it into an Athearn RTR SD39. Before we get into it, a couple things. I don't endorse any particular manufacturer over another. I'm just doing this as a how-to series for your own information. When I was disassembling the SD39, I was pulling out the front headlights. And during this process, I accidentally pulled off the bottom motor clip from the DCC decoder right here. Starting fresh, I'm going to pull these snoods off the DCC decoder, starting with the first one, the second one. Then I'm going to lift up these wires, setting the decoder free. Repeating this process 8 more times, I just have the speakers left to pull. Now that the speaker is disconnected from the decoder, I start unscrewing. And 2. And then I lift up the speaker box off the chassis and set aside for later. Next up is to remove the power trucks from the chassis. First by pulling off the worm gear cover on the corner. Pull off the worm gear itself, set aside for later. Repeat the process for the other truck as well. Moving on to the front speaker, I'm going to use a hacksaw blade to cut onto the front weight, using a Sharpie to color in where you want to remove. I also take the opportunity to ensure everything aligns correctly. After cutting a notch into the front weight, drill 2 holes and then tap them for 1/72 screws. These screws will be used to mount the sugar cube speaker baffle. As you tap the 1/72 holes, be sure to go slow and take your time. If necessary, use a little light oil to reduce friction on the threads on the tap. Now drill 2 holes on the speaker baffle that are in alignment with the ones on the front weight. Use 2 1/72 screws threaded through the speaker baffle into the front weight. Mount the speaker onto the baffle. Let's turn our attention back to the chassis by unthreading the tank screw. Now remove the tank to reveal the 4 mounting screws for the motor saddle. To lift off the motor, loosen these 4 screws. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Motor may now be pulled from the chassis. I used a Kato 956010 motor with flywheels and old style motor mount, which unfortunately didn't quite fit onto the Athearn frame. As you can see, part of the motor mount bumps into the inside of the motor cavity off the Athearn frame. Use a Dremel moto tool with a 409 cutoff wheel to cut a little bit of clearance onto the motor mount. Shave about the width of a 409 cutoff wheel from the motor mount. When test fit again, everything lines up perfectly. The 4 Kato motor mount pegs line up with the Athearn chassis. Let's do a quick test fit with the worm gear and hex drive system, making sure everything lines up and turns freely. I elected to install the rear gearbox first for this test. Now for the moment of truth. Success! Next, I decided to mount the rear speaker box in place, putting in screw number 2 and number 1. Next up is to cut off the motor leads and also solder on wires before final installation into the chassis. I went ahead and tinned both wires before soldering to the Kato motor leads. Now that I have 2 wires ready to go, I went ahead and soldered them onto the trim Kato motor leads. I started soldering the bottom motor lead, and when that was complete, I flipped over the Kato motor harness to expose the top. Starting to come together. As we did to the bottom, we're going to do to the top. First, trim the excess copper from the Kato motor lead. and apply a little flux, and go ahead and solder on the wire. With this step complete, let's install it into the Athearn SD39 frame. All it took was two 3/48 screws to retain the Kato motor to the bottom of the Athearn chassis. Let's complete the mechanical aspect of this build and install the front power truck assembly. I ended up keeping the stock 1.305 inch universals for this build. Now thread the front wires between the weight and the speaker before installing. Okay, now tighten down the two screws, starting off with the first one and the second. And here we are. This is the build so far, and coming up is the DCC decoder install, video part 2. And I thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Leave any comments you might have, questions in the area down below.